Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with Koch in Congress and Fortune Society, and also you talk about Richard Nathan?
The dirt, you want the dirt. Ed Koch was our point. There were two guys in Congress in the early days of Fortune about federal prisoners. One was Ed Koch. His office was very responsive, and he was a very progressive, as some of you may recall, if you can get past all the cobwebs of recent years. He was a very progressive man in Congress. And our other man was John Conyers, who was a congressman from Michigan. And those are the two officers we call. And I established a very good relationship with Ed in those days and was on his transition team. He appointed me to the Human Rights Commission. And in that first term, I was very supportive of him as he gradually moved to the right. And you want to know the Richard Nathan story?
Well, just, I mean, what was your relationship with Richard, and also your involvement with the Commission on Human Rights, and what happened subsequently?
Richard Nathan, when Ed was in Congress and was planning to run for mayor, he would have these Sunday night potluck suppers, and the people I met there were all the people who were eventually prominent in his administration. I met John Cicero and Mary Barrett Nichols and all the names that, even there was a Time story the other day about Ed at the Algonquin. Did anybody see that? Nobody reads the papers anymore, but there was a Time story. There's John Cicero and some of the other people I met. Anyway, I became very friendly with several of the people there, one of whom was a deputy health commissioner named Richard Nathan. He was the under Abe Bean. Remember Abe, the former mayor? And one night we were at Ed's house and everybody was eating the terrible macaroni and salads and everybody was. And Richard and I were in the kitchen sort of cleaning up. And I said, look at Richard, I think everybody's left. I'm out of here. And he said, I'll walk you home. So as we got to the door, Ed turned to Richard and said, oh, Richard, stay. And I'm thinking, what am I, chopped liver? And Richard said, no, Ed, I have to go, but I'll call you later. So as we're walking across Washington Square Park, a little bit of New York history began. I turned to Richard and said, what was that all about? He said, what? And I said, Richard, stay, David, you don't exist. And he said, Ed and I are having a relationship. And I thought, a congressman in 1976 is having a relationship with an openly gay man? That was heavy. So it was in the back of my mind there. Ed's campaign goes on very well, and Richard comes to me at one point and says, you remember, those of you who remember the 77 campaign, Ed was holding pinkies with Bess Meyerson, the former Miss America. They were all over the place. And so Richard came to me and said, I'm history. It's been made clear to me that I have to get out of here. And he said, I'm moving to LA, and which he did, and he opened a very successful health consulting firm. And that was the end of it. Ed became mayor, and Richard was in LA. A few years later, when the AIDS crisis took place, Larry Kramer, Larry's not here. He and I have different versions of this. Larry Kramer was at this health conference in California and sees Richard Nathan, and they go through, that game called Jewish Geography. I know you. Where did you go to school? And they realized that they both knew each other from New York activism, and they realized that they both knew me. Who do you know in New York? Larry said, you know David. Richard said we were good friends. And for some reason, of all people, Richard Nathan tells Larry Kramer that he is the much-rumored secret lover of Ed Koch. Ed was then, at this point, going for his 4th term when this took place. So that must be, what, 80-something. He was in a primary against David Dinkins and was favored to win. And Larry Kramer came back to New York and called the Post, the Voice, New York Magazine, and said, the mayor has a secret male lover, and the person who can verify it and was witness to it is David Rothenberg. I arrive at my office the next day, and it's like a bad movie. They had everything but the hats with the tickets in it. And Jack Newfield, Wayne Barrett, Tom Robin may have been there, I don't remember, but there were a lot of them. And I said, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. I go into my office, lock the door, call Larry in California, and said, are you out of your, I called Richard in California, and said, are you out of your mind? You're going to be Judith Exner. Remember her?
Yes.
I stonewalled about that. Giuliani was planning, it was going to run, and he thought he was going to run against Ed Koch. Because the assumption was Koch was going to defeat Dinkins in the primary. Richard calls me and said, I'm coming to New York. I've been subpoenaed by the Southern District Court, which was Giuliani, and they quizzed him for about 12 hours. Richard said, I may need a shoulder. So I said, I'll keep my dinner plans open. And he said he was grilled in this room about his relationship with Ed. And he had gotten one consulting grant from New York as a health consultant, so that the implication was that there was a money payoff. And he said that the Giuliani people were pretty brutal to him, and they were going to use that in the campaign. As it turned out, it didn't happen because Dinkins upset Koch and then defeated Giuliani. So it still didn't come out that Ed Koch had this nefarious and duplicitous past.